So my name is Joakim, as you heard, and Micke. We're going to tell you a little bit more about ourselves, but we have a company that we started together with 3 others. Better product work, experienced product professionals, hands-on experience from several best-in-class product companies. Me myself, I worked at Spotify from 2011 to 2017 for 6.5 years, from 8 teams, 10 teams to over 200 teams. So I was a co-creator of the Spotify model of squads and tribes and chapters, coming up with all those terms and filling them with meaning over those years. Since then, I've been a consultant with Crisp, where I hooked up with Micke, where we did some work together, among other things, leading transformations at Telenor, a telco, and a big insurance market leader in Sweden. And yeah, some of our other colleagues, it's 5. But Micke, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, hi all. I'm Micke, or Michael in Swedish, as my mother called me. I've been a consultant for a long time. I've been a consultant since 1994, and building different products and systems and so on over the years. Have a system developer background and so on. Been with Crisp for 14 years, where I met Joakim. I've also been a CTO in a startup trying to build great products in the medtech area. Has its challenges, but helped a lot of successful Swedish companies, mainly like Klarna and H&M, in how to develop great products. Yeah, that's about me, I think.
And just a little bit, we at Better Product Work believe that the conventional way to build product is broken, and we try to challenge that convention, partnering with visionary leaders who have the conviction to build high-performing organizations, leveraging these experiences from how great product companies work. All right, so we're here to then talk about collaborative org design, and we'd like to hear it from you, and Roland, feel free, of course, to chime in as well to answer this question. What's one word that pops into your head when you think of a typical reorg? And we're actually, even though, feel free to just shout it out, but I also want to, what's happening? Yeah, I need to push that button. To use a Menti so that we visualize what you're saying and also capture it, and then you're also ready for some other Menti questions that we will have at the end. So please go to menti.com and use that code, or just use the QR code. I guess most of, if not all, are familiar with Menti. Otherwise, it's really simple. And put that in. And feel free to also shout it out if you want to, but it's enough that we get them here, I guess. What pops into your head when you think of a typical reorg? Oh, wow. Nice. Opportunity, chaos, expensive, fear, not solving the problems, change. Yeah, so that's what we would expect to typically see. It's interesting that we have both, some negative things, let's say, like fear and chaos and so on, but also opportunities, for instance, and that's exactly the paradox of reorgs. They promise clarity and opportunity. Unfortunately, however, they often deliver confusion and chaos and all of that. But if reorgs are supposed to make things better, why do they often feel like this? Well, we believe that it's because many reorgs follow a top-down, management-driven, behind closed doors approach that often backfires. And typically in those top-down reorgs, we get misalignment with reality, where the leaders who then design the org from top down often lack the day-to-day ground level understanding of how teams actually work. Typically base it on business units and business unit thinking and building these proverbial silos rather than focus on the workflow reality, and that might accidentally increase dependencies, slow things down. On top of that, we have, of course, team topologies and Conway's law. We'll touch a little bit on that later, that show that org structures shape architecture, and bad structures lead to friction and inefficiencies. It's all, regardless what we think about Conway's law, it's at least we should acknowledge that organizations are socio-technical systems, and we benefit from having the people actually involved with architecture and technology involved in designing how the work should be done. We also see lack of context and meaningful participation, and traditional change management talks about resisting change as if it's something that should be overcome. We find that funny. We like to take more of a product approach to change and transformations. And we wouldn't say that, oh, we're trying to sell our product, but people are resisting it. How can we win over them and overcome that resistance? No, it's all about adoption. They don't resist for sake of it. They resist when they don't understand the purpose and the change. The change feels arbitrary, or when they have no agency or involvement in shaping it. And then, of course, the waterfall irony, especially if we're trying to increase agility, empowerment in the organization. It's like, oh, if you see here, we're with the consultancy firm Agile BS. BS stands for Business Solutions, of course. And here's our plan for your Agile transformation. First, to really understand your org, we'll observe and analyze your department for some time. Based on the analysis, we will design and describe the transformation effort. Following, we will implement the new Agile processes. Lastly, we will test how the transformation works, integrated with current processes across the organization. We expect the full transformation to take a couple of years. And yeah, the irony that we want people to think for themselves, self-organize, be empowered, do it iteratively and incrementally, but we design that org like planning the perfect structure up front, like old school waterfall project management. And then we see often a lot of unintended consequences. The reorg death spiral, as we sometimes call it. Poorly planned reorgs often cause more problems than they solve, or new and unintended or unanticipated consequences that leads to more reorgs. So this sounds bad, but it sounded also like this is something many of you recognize or have.
It depends. It depends, Joakim. If you're in a consultancy firm, it doesn't sound that bad at all.
Yeah, that's money to be had. Awesome. No, but chances are, if you've been working for a few years in this industry, and especially if you've been working in a bigger company, you've been involved in at least one of your, maybe several. So we believe, of course, there's a better way. What if the people closest to the work actually designed how it's done? And I'm going to tell you 1.5 story on how we did that at Spotify. And then Micke will also tell you a story of how him and I did it together, helped a company recently that's very different from Spotify. So it's not just a sure that works at Spotify, but and for those of you who have been living under a rock for the last 15 years or so, Spotify is a big music streaming service that became very successful already in the 2015, 2016, a lot of active users and paid subscribers, and today is the absolutely dominant music streaming service. But during these years, I worked at Spotify, and yeah, 2016, we were really successful, thousands of people, 200 teams maybe, but then something happened. This thing happened. Not a big deal, you think? the Alexa speaker or the Echo speaker, Amazon Echo speaker with Alexa. Suddenly there was a voice-controlled speaker, and they were really selling. Like this is 26% of the sales is Echo in 2014, and in 2016 it's 42% of Amazon devices. So it was growing really fast. Amazon had 70 million subscribing households in the US using their services. And if you asked Alexa, I bought one of these as soon as it came out, more or less, and installed it in my kitchen in the US. And then I said, Alexa, play the Beatles from Spotify. And it would start playing the Beatles from my Spotify account. But then my wife thought, oh, that's cool. Alexa, play the Rolling Stones. And the Rolling Stones started playing. But did you notice the difference there? She didn't add from Spotify. So now it used the Prime membership, had enough big artist songs to actually just start playing from that subscription. And maybe that's good enough. Why am I paying these extra dollars a month when I use Alexa mainly to play music? Because smart speaker owners use their device for the absolute top use case was to play music, 71%. So this was a huge threat to Spotify. They're coming in between us and making us to a commodity, and yeah, we really need to do something. And this is one of many common reasons, and we won't list them all, but why a reorg is triggered in the first place. And I would say this is one of the good ones, that we can reorg to face a threat or seize an opportunity. Then there are a whole list of reasons why organizations reorg that are not such a good idea. New management wants to put their mark on the org and so on. But this meant that, and this is a little bit our view of the world, our org topologist perspective, if you may, the product model or the empowered product teams or Spotify model view of it. So we believe that there's a strategic context based on the business mission and objectives that informs what kind of product vision and principles do we think will fulfill the business, or rather help us create products the customers love, yet works for the business objectives. And when there is a change in the product vision, which happened with the advent of Alexa, that actually triggers then possibly a change in team topology. And you might be familiar with the book Team Topology, and that's not really what we talked about. That book wasn't even out at Spotify. But we would say that Marty Kagan has captured the way we work with Spotify and the way other great product companies work pretty well in his book Empowered. So what we mean by team topologies in this context is the way we organize our people into teams to best enable them to do great work that will increase the chances that we are actually fulfilling the product vision. So if the product vision changes, there's a high likelihood that how we organize needs to change in this model of product development. And it should be guided by principles that maximize for empowerment. Ownership, meaning that teams should have a sense of ownership of the work, having responsibility for specific products or features or services from conception to delivery and beyond, even to maintenance and support. And autonomy, meaning that you can make decisions about your work without waiting for approval. You can move fast. You don't have to navigate hierarchies and cross-functional, of course, and so on. And then alignment is a huge thing.
Before we continue, can you clarify for me in this approach what you define as a team? Is that flexible? Is that long-lived? How many people? What is it?
Long-lived. It's a typical durable, long-lived agile team, 7 plus minus 2 people. We called it at Spotify, of course, the autonomous squad. Marty calls it an empowered product team, and it's exactly the same thing. Although, it's for this purpose, it's exactly the same thing. So small agile team working together, having ownership, autonomy, and alignment. And there is, of course, no one perfect organization design. So these we need to be tweaking constantly, and we have to change them organically based on new opportunities and threats. But we want them to be long-lived and durable so that we can gel together and reach, strive for high performance and so on.
Okay, so if we go back to the Alexa problem that you were facing, you spun up one new team to deal with the Alexa problem?
No, and that's what I'm getting to. So
Okay.
I'm just trying to introduce the concept and then how we actually, what happens? How did we redesign the organization based on the election? But these were the principles on how we believe that teams should be organized in order to fulfill a product vision, and hence why this new threat and or opportunity could affect this or trigger this change actually. And just finishing with alignment, and it's really key that while team have ownership and autonomy, it's also vital that they are moving in the same direction as the organization. They need to understand the broader business goals, the strategy, measures of success, and so on. So they can make local decisions that contribute to the global mission. And yeah, so that's a key factor in how do we design the teams to actually increase the chances that this is happening. So that's also what I want to say. There are no perfect org designs. There are many different trade-offs and so on. So we would typically ask, what of all our different options, which one is moving us closer to ownership, autonomy, and alignment rather than further away? Does it help us answer more questions about ownership, autonomy, and alignment than it actually raises? So that's how we would evaluate different designs, for instance. So what happened with voice was that there was a leadership, strategic leadership decision on like executive C-level that we need to do something about this. We need to really double down. We need to spin up more people and more focus on this. Where should we do it? Boston, which is where I work, because you know, Cortana, Siri, Alexa, they all have teams there. They had acquired startups in voice. MIT had a voice research center and so on. So we could poach people from all of those organizations and so on. And there was a big community around speech. So it was decided Boston. But then, you know, you figure it out. So now we have a new mission that also there was other reasons why Boston made sense, because we had strong machine learning and capabilities, and we were already doing textual analysis and you know, NLP or voice is actually textual analysis stuff. So that made sense. But this big new opportunity or threat, of course, then leads us to question, okay, how should we then be organized? And it doesn't only affect spinning up a new team, but rather, given all our objectives and what we're already doing and the business mission and this new thing, how should we reorganize ourselves? Should we just start one new team and just carry on with the others as usual? That would be an option. But what leadership did was that, so this would be the tribe leadership. So basically director of product, design and engineering or technology. So that the tribe leads that were heads of an organization of, say, let's 80 people, 80 developers and designers and so on. And the engineering managers, or as we call the chapter leads, and product managers would get together. That's like 10, 12, 15 people, me as an agile coach, and figure out, okay, what do we see? What are the different options that we see here? And we could either go this route, or we could do it like this. So we could slice it on this one or that one. And we quickly reached the first draft that we shared with the entire tribe, all the developers and so on, and presented it to them, and they could then you know, quickly say, does it make sense or is it confusing, hate it or love it? And we use that as a quick temperature check, and then have discussions on, okay, why do you love it? Why does it make sense? And two of these suggestions had all of the crosses in make sense and love it. So those were the two that we then continued with to elaborate, can we merge these two different options into one? And we identified a number of missions, like one is around facts, one is around inferrals, as we called it, one is around the actual voice mechanics, one is continue to forge features as we did in the past based on what the other teams are, yada, yada, yada. And with these missions that we started to describe, we then invited all of the other people and had a host of workshops, one per well, first overall of the missions, and then one per mission. So if you were only interested, I'm mainly interested in these two missions. Missions is similar to a squad, but we wanted to keep it on a more abstract level to allow for maybe it actually is two squads in this mission. So we didn't want to mix in numbers too soon. And then we had this discussion. So as I said, everyone was involved. We discussed what systems goes in what squad, probably based on this mission, or what mission, what competences do we probably need, what do we already have in the company, is there something we need to hire for, and all of these aspects. And constantly with alignment with this new threat and opportunity, and then the business overall, autonomy and ownership. And then after we felt like, yeah, this is good enough. Again, there are no perfect, the one solution to solve it all. It's only trade-offs. We presented, okay, this is so everyone was on board. This is how we now view it, and now you select. So everyone in the tribe would select which of these missions, which of these missions do you feel that makes the most sense from Spotify's view and from what we've just been talking about and all the business context and mission and ownership and so on. Where does it make the most sense that you work? It's not where do you want to work, and then management will take that into consideration and lay out the puzzle. No, you take responsibility and ownership for what team you want to work in. And if we, at the end of the day, we see, people often identify risks with this type of self-selection. Like, but what if everyone chooses the one cool new voice team, for instance, and no one chooses any of the other teams? Well, that wouldn't happen because you're given a problem to solve. If you would do that, let's say we were all in a big room and everyone would go and stand next to the voice squad and say, "We're done now," and leaders would say, "Are you really though?" No, of course we're not done. So we need to iterate until we have a solution. You take ownership of it.
So management sets the rules for the self-design workshop and verifies whether the puzzle is solved correctly. Is that correct?
I would say that leadership facilitates the conversation and add more context and more clarified constraints. So in this type of product model and a Spotify model, the way that we would typically solve problems, well, in a traditional organizations, it would be maybe you have a lot of freedom and then you can't agree, you can't come to a conclusion. So you would escalate it to management and say, you need to prioritize, and management would prioritize. Our view would be, why can't you reach a conclusion? What more additional context do you need? What do we need to clarify? It wouldn't be management deciding in that way. Well, they would, ultimately they would have accountability and need to break any ties, but it rarely came to that. So then you would choose, and sometimes we've done this a lot at Spotify through the years, and sometimes it would happen that there's a team or a mission that no one chooses. And we iterate and still, no one really wants to do it. That's fine. That's, as I said, there is no one solution. This is now feedback to the process that maybe we didn't think about it in the right way then. That there are some factors here that this doesn't work. So how can we solve this? And we would have a workshop, and then we decided that let's split this mission actually into these two other missions, and we can move those systems here and there, and yeah, that'll be fine. Sometimes it will be that, I don't know where to, we have no one with deep knowledge and experience and history of these systems. They all decided to move to other teams. Okay, but what do we need to do to fix that? And we would just hand back the question and say, oh, well, maybe I can be in both teams for 3 months and I can do a lot of knowledge transfer, and then at the end of the day, I'm still in the tribe and we figure it out and okay, let's try that. And it's ownership and agency put to the scores. And yeah, we some people that visited Spotify, Sandy Mamoli, she's now I think chairperson of Agile Alliance, but she and her colleague did a talk back in 2014, the self-organizing organization, total Spotification at Trade Me, inspired by what they've learned from Spotify, that ultimately ended up in a book about creating great teams and self-selection, as they started calling it, instead of total Spotification. So maybe, and this has been around for quite some time, but the difference we would say about the collaborative org design that we're describing now and self-selection is that self-selection basically starts at, okay, we have the team designs more or less. How do we now select the right teams? While we're suggesting, go a step further, involve the people in actually designing the teams available for and the constraints and so on. Michael will go in a little bit more detail into how we could actually structure this or what we've done with other clients. I wanted to hear, I'm going to pause here. That was kind of the Spotify story. And as I said, Michael is going to tell another story that goes a little bit more into detail and actually what are the tools you can use to do this yourselves. But I first wanted to hear, well, do you have any thoughts and questions about this? And also, has anyone actually, well, you probably heard, some of you, about team self-selection. Is this something you practiced or tried?
No.
And Michael can set up his slides.
But I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. So I do really like the approach of having the teams decide on what missions there are, and they can, based on intrinsic motivation, choose on which mission they want to work on. However, I do feel like at some point it was a bit of a inside out perspective, because if there might be a mission that creates way more customer value, but if no one chooses it's not really a good thing for the business. So where comes the balance into play, where you have on one side intrinsic motivation of the employee and on the other side the customer value created by a set mission?
Okay, yeah, I probably wasn't clear enough. So it's not where would you be most motivated to work? Of course, that's one of the factors, or the heuristics, as Michael will talk about. But it's constantly the question: what would be best for Spotify and our mission and these new opportunities that we see, that I would work? And of course, if you feel that, well, the best for the customer value for Spotify's business and for the new voice thing would be that I work in this team that I absolutely hate. Okay, then now we have an issue because then now we have to make a trade-off. What is the best trade-off? Is there any way we can solve this? But it's more like we're being really clear on what heuristics do we want to use. We're really educating. This is an ongoing effort, by the way, but especially in these events, we're educating all the teams in what are the business missions. So now when we talk about this voice, we're sharing a lot of these are the insights and the data behind it. This is the research we've already been doing into voice. These are the options that we believe will help us win this market, and blah 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 blah. And if they seem, and this is back to Roland's question with the leadership's role, if it seems like, I mean, leadership is involved in all the conversation, and if it feels like they're heading in the wrong direction or there's a lack of understanding, they can try to clarify and say, well, did you really understand this thing, or did you actually consider this customer thing or this market opportunity? Because I'm not hearing that. I'm only hearing you talking about blah 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 blah. So that's how they would facilitate and help this conversation along.
I have another question.
Thank you.
You were referring to Marty Kagan, and I observed the same vagueness in your talk as I observe in the Marty Kagan approach. So, and the vagueness that I have is the unclarity about, yeah, sure, there's team self-selection around product challenges, great stuff. And then the sprint starts.
How many teams will start working on that initiative? And more importantly, how will you manage that those teams properly coordinate and build something integrated together each sprint? Because I didn't hear you say anything about how that, you said there will be more than one team working probably on that Alexa problem. How do they work in your model?
Well, there's a 3-day course for that, and I know you attended it, the 2-day version at some point.
No, man, you can still explain the principle a little bit, please.
Yeah, so this is not really a talk about that, but I could mention some things about that, but it's not. I I think this approach is orthogonal to whether you're using Kagan's model or less or safe or whatever. You could still involve the teams in this. You could have the teams design the requirement area or the teams or the agile release train and so on.
Or you could use project managers to get it fixed
Yeah.
in the first topology. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I
You
mean,
don't care as long as everybody has
I
this
care. I care.
alignment.
I personally do, but it's not like if you're doing X, you can't have the teams involved in designing the organization.
Okay, so actually, if I map this to org topologies, what you're saying here is, listen, what we think is very important is that people can have some form of autonomy and ownership aligned with the bigger challenge that we have with the vision. And then the self-selection is a very important step. And after that, the way you manage the execution, that could be resource-oriented topology with project management, or it could be I don't know, more feature focused, or it could be a higher adaptive topology where people are, you know, in a team construct, really collaborating together. That's up to the implementation, as long as everybody has the same self-selection process and connection to the vision, right? That's your...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you could do all sorts of things, right? I have no control over what people do. I'm basically we're sharing our experience of how we've done this, and it's not a packaged method or anything like that. But I would, it's a little bit, I've never seen that in reality where people would, we're not open to having agile and empowered teams, but we definitely want the teams to be part of designing the organization, and I would say it's a step beyond that. So it's a little bit of a theoretical issue, but I'm assuming that you could do that. But I would say that how we would approach it at Spotify and in a product model is talk, and create a lot of venues for how can we make sure that we have clear communication at all times between different teams, and without introducing the middleman or messengers to go between and just introducing even more gaps. So at Spotify, for instance, in this tribe, we would have a product manager forum at least several times a week where all the product managers of the teams would meet. We would have an effective squad circle where squad representatives would meet. We would have tribe gatherings. We would have daily, stand-ups around how is the entire tribe doing. We would have, all of these forums in place to encourage communication, sharing, conversations. How can we help each other? Are we on track? Are we sharing the same goal? Are we doing in different directions? But is there a new context from the company or from other tribes and other teams? Whoops, there's a team that's doing voice in the car. There's probably we should talk, and you see these opportunities. All right. So, and we come back a little bit to the benefits of this approach. That's kind of slightly related to what you were just asking, Roland. But Michael, you want to share the scale-up story?
Yes, I think I do, right? Good. So this is from an assignment that me and Joakim did last year. So it was a scale-up company. They were about 100 people. Around half of that was development department, so to speak. And the background here was that they had remarkable success and been really successful with their product, and they had experienced significant growth. So they had hired a lot of people, And as a result from that, their current organizational structure no longer adequately supported their needs. So to continue to be successful, they need to look over how they were organized and also how they worked, of course. But for this talk, we're focusing on the organization part and not the way of working. So that was what they needed to look into. And so, of course, working with them for a while, interviewing people, looking into things and so on, and seeing how is it today, finding out their strengths and weaknesses and so on. We saw that their rapid growth had led to challenges in communication, collaboration, and efficiency. And the current structure was stopping them really from adapting to the changing market demands and how to innovate effectively, which was important for them. So these were some things, and there was, of course, a lot more that we don't have time to go into today, and it's not really important for that, but a lot of things. And a funny fact around this was that even though they were a startup becoming a scale-up, they were working in a very traditional way. They organized with hierarchies. They had very little cooperation or collaboration between the existing teams that they had. They were not always cross-functional either. And they had some superheroes that did individual work, highly skilled superheroes, but also single point of failure stuff going on. So they had no product management at all. So that didn't exist in this company. So it was really engineering managers running around trying to help out and helping teams to understand what they were supposed to do. So not a full-blown evil kind of micromanagement, but there were definitely traces of micromanagement in this for sure. So there was a lot of things to dig into. And we started out with creating a change team. So a change team is the driver of the change in the organization. And we're not trying to create a top-down or behind closed doors situation. So even though we have a change team, they are highly accountable or responsible for involving the rest of the company in the work that happens. So we try to create this as a diverse set of people as possible. So in this case, we had engineering managers, developers, testers, people in culture, and sales represented in the change team to try to get as many points of views as possible when we worked. And coming back to the comic agile picture in the beginning, yes, we worked iteratively with change. We worked transparently with what we were doing, continuously describing, communicating to the rest of the company, what have we achieved, how did we achieve that, what's happened, what's the result with the things that we did, what are our plans for now, what are the status of things, how can you become involved, what would you like to do, and so on. So constantly trying to engage and get feedback from the rest of the company on the things happening. So that's really central in how we work when we try to change a company, that we do this iteratively and transparently. And also that the things that we do, we consider them being bets. So we take a product development approach to change as well. We cannot be certain that the things that we do will have the desired effect. It's a bet that we do. We think, it's a hypothesis. We do believe that if we do this thing, if we change the name of that role to something else, then that will have these positive effects. But we don't know. So we need to validate or invalidate that hypothesis by doing some actions or activities. So that's how we approach change then when we do that. So we start them and started talking about what we needed to do in order to reorganize the development department. But we quickly realized that, okay, they hadn't, since they didn't have any product management, they hadn't really any knowing of how modern product development worked. Some had experiences from previous employers, but so we needed really to talk about what does great look like, and educate in and how a vision of how this company could look in the future. So we introduced the product operating model, or parts of it, both from a Marty Kagan way of looking at it, and a lot of others, of course, but also since we have a lot of experience ourselves, so we talked a lot about how does it look on other companies, and not only the Marty Kagan version of this, of course, and inspired by a lot of other books and good ideas and things that's out there, of course. So we talked about how do we build and deploy, how do we solve problems, and that's product discovery, talking to the customers and so on. Now, their product was in the security business, so they couldn't really talk about it, and they had a hard time to get feedback from the customers. We need to talk about how to choose which problems to solve, so that's the product strategy part, and the difference in how we lead and manage that Joakim just talked about a lot. And also establishing what an empowered product team is, more than what a feature factory team is that they really had at that moment. So getting them educated and understanding how could this look like, and getting them to start thinking about, okay, what from this could be possible for us to use at this company. So they started harvesting those ideas and saying, okay, this is something that we could implement and try out. Good. And another ingredient in this was talking about Team Topologies then that Joakim mentioned, so from this book. So giving them a little bit more of different types of teams to work with. Not all teams perhaps can be streamlined or value creating. Of course, the main part, the main body of all teams are of course value creating, but there might be a good idea that if we're trying to build some common functionality that's used in several parts of the product or in different products, then perhaps a platform is a good idea. In the beginning, when we're not so good at automated testing and having test environments for that. Okay, but we have a couple of guys that are really into that. So perhaps they should be in an enabling team in the beginning and helping other teams out in doing this. And then we have the complicated subsystem team, which is a little bit of a one-off thing, but the complicated subsystem team is really that if we have something that's so difficult, so that people knowing about it is a very scarce resource, then that could be an idea to put them into a complicated subsystem team. So perhaps in this case, these superhero guys that were buddies with Bjarne Strostrup, who created C back in the days. These guys, perhaps they could form a complicated subsystem team.
Did you experience? Because I'm not a fan of these kind of solutions.
No.
Because they create new bottlenecks and they create new buzz factors. They create new, we have to have those guys. This specialism, deep specialism that is not, there's no opportunity for the other people who actually need that specialism apparently to learn for it, because it's this special team that takes care of it. So let's all wait for the fastest guy kind of dynamics. How do you deal with that?
Well, so that's another thing. That's how you work with it, I'd say. So if you put in some other principles to that okay, even though they are the special guys right now, so you need to have an explicit way to remove that. So I totally agree with you there, Roland, that's not a good idea in the long run. So this is for us to structure right now, and then there's a vision to where do we want to be? So how can we simplify this? How can we spread the knowledge? So perhaps one principle would be that you're never alone on working on a thing. You're always at least two working on a thing. Could be a principle, for instance, to use. So you need to add that given where you want to be as an organization or a company in the future then.
Oh.
Cool. So this gave them a little bit of more of building blocks. Did you want to add something there, Joakim?
No, but just saying that Team Topologies was not a goal for us to divide them into this, but it was more to get them to think about what are different patterns and different ways of structuring and recognizing that maybe we are actually a complicated subsystem team. And then it might help to acknowledge that and see what patterns and practices are available for us to maybe move away for that, or how does that inform how we should communicate with other teams and so on. But more than anything, it was to get them thinking about different heuristics and constraints about team and org design that they didn't have, which is what Michael will talk about next.
Yeah, exactly. And also since they talk about interaction modes also, so how does team in this sense interact? And if we want to move away from that single point of failure thing, then how can that evolve over time, which is also talked about in the book and in the theory behind this. And I also actually facilitated a book club on this that went on for a month or two, where we discussed deeper these different concepts. So in order to educate some that were more interested in understanding this. And part of that in this is that, there's this concept of fracture planes here from Team Topologies. So how can we evolve the current structure to something in the future? So a fracture plane is some kind of natural seam in the software or the organization that allows the system to be split easily into two or more parts. And this actually was kind of crucial for them, because their CTO, which actually also was a very good CPO, so he had a very clear vision on where the product should be in 2026, so 2 years ahead of time. And so what we actually did when we come later here in the presentation, but we started to create an organization for fulfilling this 2026 vision. But then, of course, there's a here and now. So when we kick these teams off, we don't have people to put in all of these teams that we want to have in 2026. So how do we start? Well, then we could merge teams from the 2026 vision into current teams that we have today, but then knowing how they would split when we had recruited more people in the future. So these fracture planes became built into the organization, and everybody knew really how this could evolve into the future, and they could do that without our help, needing, having to have consultants there to help them do that. So they say they were educated in how to do that themselves. Okay. So all of this becomes ingredients to the organizational design. Then we had the findings from the assessment from the beginning. We had what great looks like. We have team topologies, and then we have this 2026 product vision. All of this goes into the stew of creating design goals, constraints, and heuristics then. So what's important for us? Because as Joakim said earlier, you can't make an organization that's good at everything. You need to be explicit on, okay, what are we actually optimizing for right now? What should this organization be good at? And make sure that's something that we're clear.
And what was it trying to be good at? Please tell me.
This one?
Yes.
Yes. That comes in 20 seconds.
Oh.
So having that led us into designing this then, the answer to your question, Roland. So we had a lot of different discussions and examples on what heuristics and constraints and design goals can you have while doing this. So they worked with this in a workshop way in order to decide, okay, which ones are important for us. And that's actually the one over here to the right. So it was the ownership, scalability, autonomy, doing something about cognitive overload, optimize for 2026 vision, and how the team relates to business outcomes and customer needs problems. So these were the heuristics that they prioritized. So this is what we're trying to optimize the organization for.
Really?
Yes.
But so how much customer is in there? How much value idea and product idea is in there? It's all internal stuff. I'm a bit surprised.
It's this.
Ownership, cognitive load, autonomy, scalability, that's all internal organizational stuff. That's like you're optimizing for creating value to the customer.
So these are internal, yes, but the optimize for the 2026 vision, I wouldn't say is internal.
Okay.
I'd say that alignment with business is not internal. That's an external view. So at least that's how we try to describe it. So the 2026 vision was, okay, how would the product be in the future in order to solve more customer problems and fulfill their needs? And alignment with business is, okay, how can we align this organization in order to fulfill business outcomes and customer needs and problems?
Okay. It's still a difficult puzzle to have so many optimizing goals that are also competing. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, at least there are fewer trade-offs to do and discuss when we have prioritized these. And then, of course, that needs to be handled in the continued discussions that we had. To say that, okay, if we do like this and optimize for the vision in this way, will that stop us from being autonomous? Will that stop us from being able to scale this? Will that stop us from knowing the ownership of the functionality that the customer would like to have, for instance? So I mean, we're trying to help them to have these discussions rather than creating a foolproof system where this would just pan out by itself.
No, but I mean, even if that's possible, but it could ownership means for teams. If you ask a developer what ownership means, they wouldn't want to have ownership over one line of code, but that would be extreme good ownership and very clear.
No,
But they would like to have like a clear a component or something that they want to own, which makes it harder to scale. It's like every item here, autonomy as well. I want to be very autonomous. Hey, but we need to have all this alignment on this product vision. So actually, you can't be that autonomous because we need to work as a big unit to be able
Sorry,
to.
Roland, I'm not sure where these questions are coming from. I mean, I would love to hear how you would organize a
Oh, I don't know. I'm asking you how you.
No, because it's like a team should be self-organized. That's one constraint.
Yeah.
That you would probably, when you introduce, let's say, Scrum or less or something, we should have requirement areas, we should have stand-ups, it's like, because we have a team size should not be more than 9, or we should try to optimize for ownership. I don't see why you think that would be.
For instance,
and we've been trying to educate them beforehand and guide and facilitate this conversation. We're really being explicit on the heuristics and constraints that many times are just assumed, or you deliver them in a training and then you just expect teams to be self-organizing and have clear role definitions and so on.
Do you have a vision for what, if you guide these conversations, you probably have an idea of what this ultimately could become. So what would be in the ultimate setup, what kind of ownership do you see then? Is that ownership at a team level, or is that actually bigger ownership? If you look at the topologies map, going vertically on understanding and working on any part of the business problem. Is that do you have any vision on this, on where you would want to, or a preference?
I don't know how we are on time, but I'm honestly, we were trying to tell a story, and I'm sensing, Roland, that you wanted a different presentation.
No, I'm good.
I'm just a little bit more clear up front, because that's not important to this story. I'm sorry. It's like it's a little bit derailing it. We're happy to talk about it and take questions after, but I don't see how it's relevant really to bring this to the close. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit anxious about time, and we'd really like to reach.
Yeah, well, I do see how it's relevant to understand your concept better and what it would bring in an organization. But it's okay if we can talk about this later, maybe at a different time, and then go deeper into this. Continue.
But I think
your
it would be
story.
more relevant to say, no, I don't believe that it's important with heuristics and constraints. I mean, you could use your heuristics and your constraints. These are the ones that we developed together with this organization because it made sense to them. We're not
All
saying
right. So
that you should use these, but you need to develop your goals, heuristics, and constraints.
So it's at the meta level. You need heuristics and constraints, and this is an example. All right. Perfect. Thank you for explaining.
I think it led us a little bit to a side.
Cool. Good. Okay, so of course, they having decided this, it was time to start working with this and trying to create different ideas on how the organization could look like. So time to start workshopping, involve a lot of people and so on in this, of course. So we started with a change team and some friends and started workshopping, a lot of post-its and whiteboards that very fast became cumbersome. So we moved over to introducing Team API from Miro, for instance. So starting with trying to explain or drafting a first mission, what kind of team would this be, and focus on competence rather than people. So what competence do we need in a team like this in order to fulfill its mission? And one of these things are kind of great to work with, but it's very complex. So having the ones that we perhaps saw from the Spotify pictures. So we started out with these, and actually they themselves remade that to another kind of Team API template that they used. So they used things like, okay, we have an anti-backlog in order to understand what this team is supposed to work with. So they're not going to work with this, for sure not going to work with this. That would never come into the backlog of this team. So in order to explain more and give more context.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
I never heard it. Anti-backlog.
Yeah. And I guess that was because they had a lot, and they were not that many teams, so they were all very pressured in trying to understand all of the different parts of that very complex product that they were selling. So I mean, there's different ways to do this, but this was a good way for them at least to understand how can we get more context on the mission. And of course, then that led us going into Miro, of course, instead to work with different ideas and versions of this. So that's of course good. Makes it easier to compare and contrast different suggestions, because what happened was that we involved all being affected by the change. So all developers, all testers, all people that were supposed to become product managers and so on into this. And so we made sure that all of them had been in workshops looking at different options. Some even took it to their own current teams and worked with it themselves and came back with new suggestions, and that was incorporated in this. So a lot of talking, workshopping, co-creation, collaboration, and so on, which led to a model that they all had been part of creating, and they all felt that they had been had their say in it and had a possibility to affect on how this would look like in the future for them. And that actually made us coming over to, when that was done, into the team self-selection that we talked with, and all of these questions that Joakim and you and Aimee had around, how would that work in real life? They had all of those questions for sure. So we had documentation, we wrote a lot of things and tried to educate on how would this really work. We even made a very detailed plan on, okay, how do we introduce this to the whole company? How do they understand this? We set off a week where this would take place with you saw the example from Spotify with the whiteboards and the avatars that you move around and put yourself in a team and so on. And then during this week, they had time slots where management were ready to take on all the different hard questions that everybody was going to have. So a whole week set aside for this. They start out on Monday morning, they come to the workshop on the Monday afternoon, and okay, management's there, no people there, no questions, looking into the whiteboards, it's already done. Everybody had put their marker avatars on some place, it was done.
So
Why?
this was just management fear, and that's why they were so over preparing, I guess. And then the
Yes.
people were actually quite cool with it.
Yes, exactly. And so the result from this was really that, so we heard from management, like, usually people are hesitant and resist this kind of change, but this time they really welcomed and embraced it, this kind of reorg. Or this was the most uneventful reorg I've ever seen. I've never experienced a reorg go this smoothly. So because we had involved all of them in designing how the development department, how the team should look like, how they should interact, what were they supposed to do, this kind of self-selection workshop or work was not a big thing, really. So over to you, Joakim.
So what are the benefits of this collaborative org design? Well, teams design with context, leading to more practical and effective structures, because the people who understand the work shape the teams will reduce friction and misalignment, really understanding the socio-technological system rather than just the business perspective or only the technology perspective. It's being co-created. And this shared ownership and co-creation creates engagement, accountability, adaptability. And when the teams shape their structure, they take ownership and responsibility to making it work and can also evolve it as needed, because they have been involved. They've received all the context, they understand the business missions and the customer problems, they understand the technological challenges, the personal chemistry, all the heuristics and design goals and so on that they've been working with. Then they feel both that they have the understanding and the agency, ownership, initiative and mandate to actually tweak it, suggest changes, and figure it out as we go, so that org design becomes an ongoing capability rather than a one-time event. So instead of this big bang reorg, everything is crazy, and then people are upset, and management are saying, let's wait at least 3 years before we do another reorg because this was so messy, which is exactly the wrong problem. As Martin Fowler said, if it hurts, do it more often, because then you're forced to take the pain away and continuously refine your ways of working and how the organization is designed. That was our story on how we've been doing collaborative org design at both Spotify and with clients.
So it's all about involving the people, making sure they understand how this, what the reasoning behind the new design should be, and letting them give their input, making sure they self-design their new state. And then you as facilitators or coaches help them to make choices along the way. And you're trying to be unbiased is what I understood, because when I went diving into the content and direction, you went like, whoa, that's not our problem, that was their choice. So you actually, you try to stay away from that. You just want to facilitate the process for people to own and co-own and co-design their future org design, correct?
Well, we are extremely opinionated, but I mean, we're not excluding that this could work regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, it wasn't the point. We wanted to focus on how do you do this collaborative org design, no matter what kind of org design is your target or goal.
Okay.
Yeah, so the whole part of educating them in what does good look like, how does the best product companies out there in the world work, what in our experience working with Spotify, Klarna, and other great companies, what have we learned and how these people how that actually works. So that's where we're opinionated. where we have the ideas. Yeah, we think that good product companies work in this way.
Yeah.
But of course, we're open to them saying that, okay, yes, cool guys, but we're not a Spotify. You know, that whole discussion always comes up.
We're one way of connecting it to org topologies would of course be that when you're doing the assessment, you're using that map to see, okay, where is this organization now? And then you have what does great look like? You do some kind of more or less traditional gap analysis that we want to be in this corner. And then I would say
Well,
that
exactly
your
because of
constraint would be your accesses and archetypes and so on. And okay,
yeah.
how do we now involve the teams in how we get from this box to that?
Yeah, and understand what kind of dynamics and pros and cons and organizational capabilities you will get if you find out that, you know, if you're in a certain quadrant on the map, then that will give you some kind of, well, organizational capabilities like speed of change or speed of delivery or whatever. And that depending on what you need for the goal ambition that you have, you might want to reconsider your first impulse on where you want to be with your organization.
Yeah, I think so. So our heuristics and design goals and so on is our way, I think, of trying to explain the things that you're explaining in the org topologies.
Yeah. Okay.
The more of an empowered organization you have as your target, of course, it's going to make sense to also empower people to be part of it. As you mentioned earlier, it's not likely that we want to introduce a very hierarchical command and control organization. The first thing we do is let's empower people to build it. So that's it's probably goes well together with different empowered models.
Yeah, it flows in the same direction. Yeah, I get it. Good. Thank you very much for your contribution and sharing your thoughts on this collaborative org design. And for those people who are watching this, feel free to join in our monthly introduction to org topologies workshops, where we explain our approach on how to assess, map, and elevate your organization. So thank you very much, Joakim Sundén. Thank you very much, Mikael Brodd, for your contribution to our memberships.
And we just wanted to also say that, of course, if you're interested in more of the questions that you asked, Roland, then we have courses and webinars about that as well. And we'll offer a 20% discount for everyone in your network that watches this video.
Cool. Thanks very much. Happy to share. Okie dokie. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for your...